Tesla continues to face hurdles as it tries to construct a gigafactory in Berlin, which is important for its expansion plans. How has Germany been delaying the plant's progress? After establishing a manufacturing base in Fremont, California, Tesla wanted to expand to other parts of the world, with Germany as one of its first targets. This led to the decision to build a gigafactory near Berlin in Germany, which was meant to produce batteries, battery packs, and powertrains in addition to assembling the Model Y. This was announced by Musk himself after receiving a Golden Steering Wheel Award in late of 2019 in Berlin.
And I actually have an announcement, which I think we hopefully well received, that we've decided to put the Tesla Gigafactory Europe in the Berlin area. Yeah.
That's news!
That's news.
The company targeted a finishing date of July of 2021 and began work on the site in Grünheide in 2020, which is about 35 kilometers away from Berlin. It would be the most advanced high-volume e-car production plant in the world, employ more than 10,000 people, and produce 500,000 cars annually. But opposition began immediately. The first round of confrontation came from environmental activists that wanted Tesla to reduce the water consumption at the plant by 1/3, which Tesla quickly acquiesced to. The factory site is actually within a designated water protection zone, and Tesla adjusted its building plans to comply. Still in a bid to address environmental concerns, Tesla agreed to compensate for the forest it would clear by deforesting other parts of the region and relocate some of the bats and reptiles that called the forest habitat. It also installed 368 nesting boxes for the remaining birds. The local residents are not the only source of delay and disruption Tesla's Giga Berlin is facing. Much of it can be traced back to the government's bureaucracy. It habitually draws out the process of approving permits, and it has had some serious implications for Tesla. The most headline-grabbing one took place when Tesla was ordered to halt construction until it made a rather hefty €100 million deposit in December of 2020. This came from Brandenburg's environmental authority that had actually been sitting on the approval application for the Gigafactory, meaning Tesla is paying for a delay by the authority. The sum, a requirement for a conditional building permit, was meant to serve as a guarantee that Tesla would be able to restore the site to its former state in the event that final approvals weren't granted. The implication was that Tesla had been building at a large financial risk, as it would lose all the money spent so far, which amounts to billions, in addition to the security deposit. Around the same time, a court ordered Tesla to halt clearing a pine forest on the factory site in response to the complaints made by environmental activists. The claim was that clearing of the forest could harm hibernating snakes and lizards found in the area. Tesla was required to prove its action would not harm the animals. Musk even had to fight for the right to call the plant Giga Berlin. George Steinbach, Minister of Economic Affairs for the state of Brandenburg, revealed he had wanted the factory to promote Brandenburg rather than Berlin, but Musk threatened to abandon the whole project. A compromise was reached as they settled for the name Giga Berlin Brandenburg, just like the airport in the state, but Musk got ahead of the minister by tweeting the name Giga Berlin, which quickly caught on with the media. Tesla was also penalized for driving piles into the sandy soil for the foundation of the factory. As a designated water protection zone, it was illegal to use such construction methods. Tesla commissioned an independent investigation that proved that the piles would not cause serious damage to the water supply in the area, likely succeeding in assuring the authorities as an exception was issued to cover the project. Still on water-related delays, while a water source has been secured for the first phase of the factory, subsequent phases may have to wait as the source they will depend on may take up to 5 years to be ready, as reported by an employee of the State Environmental Agency. The agency is yet to commence exploratory work on the groundwater that would feed Giga Berlin future constructions. The latest snag in the final approval process was delivered by Brandenburg's environmental minister Axel Vogt, who cited as a bottleneck that he referred to as a lack of fundamental information as regards to Tesla's building plans. This could kickstart a new public consultation that could last 4 weeks, with an additional 4 weeks to take objections from local residents. Put together, it means the mid-May final approval Tesla was hoping for would be pushed out further and it would miss its July opening target. This is before taking into account the numerous preliminary applications that have been submitted since March. In its recent Giga Berlin update, Tesla indicated it remains on track for a late 2021 commissioning of the plant, signifying the company is already thinking beyond its initial July 2021 target. Compared to the process in Berlin, the plant Shanghai has sailed smoothly, where Tesla has been able to start assembling cars less than a year after breaking soil. It had faced far less local opposition, less strict environmental regulation, and no drawn-out approval process. As a sign of its frustration at the lengthy approval process, Tesla sent a scathing letter to a regional court in Berlin last month. One of the points raised was the lack of a definitive time frame for the final approval, 16 months after submitting applications. It is a rather absurd development, as the company plans to start operation in the factory in July, and much of the construction has been completed without a building permit. Tesla bluntly pointed out that the state government officials were actually hampering progress in green energy and climate-friendly infrastructure, which would be counter to the government's stated goal of eliminating carbon emissions by 2045. The best excuse for the delay a spokesperson could come up with was that the state can't legally make a distinction between climate-friendly and non-climate-friendly constructions, making it difficult to offer waivers for projects like the Gigafactory. Perhaps, to save face, the spokesperson announced that the state chancellery had formed a task force to fast-track approval for Tesla. Time will tell what impact this would have on the severely delayed process. Nothing was said about compensation for the lost time Tesla had suffered. While not directly related to the government, Tesla may have to square up against Germany's biggest workers' union. The company is not known to favor unions in the US, but the IG medal may cause some issues as it pushes for industry-wide contracts for future employees of the Gigafactory.
Are there problems now here with the German officials?
I think we're making pretty good progress. You can see for yourself we've made a lot of progress as things are moving. So far so good.
So which time we can get the first car out of this place?
I mean, should be hopefully end of this year. It's hard to predict with precision.
Despite being a voluntary association, the union has a lot of political and economic leverage at its disposal to force its way through. Despite Germany's initial enthusiasm for the Giga Berlin, as it aligns with its climate goals, the bureaucracy has opposed many challenges as Tesla tries to get final approval for its construction project. The delay has consequences for the American electric vehicle maker, who may have to postpone the opening of the factory. Talking of reusability, Musk's SpaceX and Blue Origin by Jeff Bezos come to our mind. But to many, the latter has failed to hit the mark even though it was founded 2 years before SpaceX. While SpaceX seems to be constantly innovating and pushing forward with new technology every year, a lot of people can't help but think that Blue Origin is putting in more effort than they're getting out of the results. The Blue Origin logo that's comprised of a feather is a symbol of the perfection of flight and lethargy. Now stepping down as the CEO of Amazon, Jeff Bezos is one of the most renowned billionaires and has set the ultimate benchmark for all future e-commerce startups and holds some influence in the media empire as well, owning the Washington Post. In a letter to his employees, the outgoing CEO has stated that he is going to focus his time and energy on other passions and listed Blue Origin as one of them. So to sum it up, perhaps the company's busiest phase is yet to show up. And despite it all seeming perfect when Blue Origin managed to land the New Shepard vertically and reuse the boosters, the company has gone through a string of failures, and losing NASA's Human Landing System contract to Elon Musk's SpaceX is just one of them. But is the company spiraling down towards the bottom? Let us go through some other factors behind the alleged downfall of the company and proceed towards the final verdict. The two billionaires have shared different yet high hopes for their companies and the future of humanity. And while Musk aims to develop a human colony on Mars, Jeff Bezos thinks of free-floating colonies.
These are very large structures, miles on end, and they hold 1 million people or more each. These are really pleasant places to live. Some of these O'Neill colonies might choose to replicate Earth cities. This is Maui on its best day all year long. No rain, no storms, no earthquakes.
However, the pace adopted by Blue Origin only means that they are going to lag behind anything Musk is going to achieve. Or perhaps they're only sticking by their motto, Gradatim Ferociter, which is Latin for step by step ferociously. Though Elon Musk has had failures of his own, he famously said that if you are not failing enough, you are not innovating.
Anything which is significantly innovative is going to come with a significant risk of failure.
And his greed for glory has paid off well, as till now, as Musk has bagged the achievement of sending up to 100 plus flights boasting the reusability features on Falcon 9, while Bezos has been focusing on space tourism for the ultra-rich with his newer endeavors. With a current high bid of $2.8 million, Blue Origin's website is already running a bid for the first seat on his new Shepard, so he surely knows how to make money. The batch of 6 thrill seekers that was to be up there in 0G by 2020 might just have to wait even longer because of the delay caused by the pandemic. And since we're talking of delays, the 98 meters tall New Glenn by Amazon, which is designed to carry 50 tons of payload to low Earth orbits with reusable boosters, was planned to take flight by the end of this year. But now it won't be entering the skies before late 2020. Named after John Glenn, the plan with New Glenn is to ferry people to space as well in the long run, and the boosters would be landing on a ship, much like the Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy do. About the rescheduling and launch date, a company representative was quoted saying, "This updated maiden flight target follows the recent Space Force decision to not select New Glenn for the National Security Space Launch Phase 2 Launch Services procurement." New Glenn is proceeding to fulfill its current commercial contracts, pursue a large and growing commercial market, and enter into new civil space launch contracts. We hope to launch NSSL payloads in the future and remain committed to serving the U.S. National Defense Mission. Blue Origin and Northrop Grumman failed to impress the Space Force, and the partnership of SpaceX and United Launch Alliance benefited out of it. However, all is not lost for Blue Origin, as NASA has allowed them to contest for future contracts under their Launch Services 2 program, which is their sole lifeline as of now. As fine as it may sound, the company would still have to escape the shadow of Elon's SpaceX before gaining anything here. And Jeff Bezos might have to pool in more money into his space company as compared to his current investment of $1 billion a year as its sole investor. The two space companies are not involved in a tussle just when it comes to rocket reusability and winning important contracts. Amazon is also trying to catch up with SpaceX in providing internet connectivity through a network of 3,000 satellites under Project Kuiper, which is more or less identical to Musk's plan with Starlink and good-for-nothing beta. The project, running under a former vice president of Starlink operations, has failed to have a head start as Musk has already sent up 1,500 satellites in space. If Kuiper succeeds, Amazon can not only offer global satellite broadband access, it can include that access as part of its Amazon Web Services, AWS, but has to launch at least half of the total by 2026 to retain the operating license granted by the FCC. Despite the outlook of this ambitious project, Amazon has shown its back to its own sister company by ditching the Blue Origin for United Launch Alliance's Atlas V launch system. What bigger of a nightmare could it have been for Blue Origin than the lack of trust shown by its own establishment? And boy, let us also not forget the embarrassing round for Blue Origin when it failed to get a contract for building a lunar lander for NASA's Project Artemis. Eventually, the $2.9 billion contract for the lander landed in Elon's lap. Under the program, NASA would put a woman and a person of color on the moon and build sustainable elements on and around it to facilitate science before finally taking the lessons and planning to shoot for Mars. Though things were going well for Blue Origin, when it teamed up with the trio of Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, and Draper when they initially submitted a proposal, it was Musk's SpaceX that had the last laugh. Perhaps NASA favored the economics above anything and chose SpaceX as it had the lowest bid at around $2.89 billion compared to an expensive one by Blue Origin squad of $5.9 billion. Now they are gearing up to drag NASA before the US Government Accountability Office to try and prove that the awarding of the contract was done unfairly. Now, as much as it can delay the work, it can also embarrass Bezos, as his chances of winning against the American space giant are close to non-existent. Apart from what we have just highlighted, some have sided with arguments dealing with human psychology by suggesting that since Bezos has a stable source of income from Amazon, he doesn't have to be worried about pacey innovation. But the moment SpaceX slows down, they're going to close out on contracts and run into worries at the revenue department. Bezos' company that has been left behind when it comes to the pace of technological advancements by smaller companies like Rocket Lab would finally show a new spirit when it puts more focus behind Blue Origin's ambitions for the cosmos? Or is it just going to be Elon Musk leading the battle and prove to be a tech presence on the lunar surface? The program is named after the Greek goddess of the moon. Artemis was the twin sister to Apollo. It's a way for NASA to show appreciation for the Apollo missions that landed the first man on the moon. The main star of the Artemis program is the Artemis Base camp that will be developed near the south pole of the moon. This is part of NASA's vision to develop a human foothold on Luna to support further deep space manned and unmanned missions. The Artemis Base camp will also play a critical support role for NASA and SpaceX's manned mission to Mars. Humans will be returning to the moon for the first time in 2024, almost 50 years after the last manned mission to Luna as part of the Artemis program. SpaceX won the bid to support NASA with the Artemis program, beating bids by Blue Origin and Dynetics. NASA awarded SpaceX a $2.89 billion contract to develop and manufacture a modified variant of the Starship for lunar landings. The initial goal of the project is to conduct 2 flights, an uncrewed demonstration mission and a crewed lunar landing. SpaceX will be transporting astronauts from the Lunar Orbital Gateway to the base camp on the surface. This will be done by using a lunar lander variant of SpaceX's Starship rocket called the Starship HLS. The HLS stands for Human Land System. The Starship itself is SpaceX's flagship rocket that will be leading the charge towards Mars as part of NASA and SpaceX's plans to visit and colonize Mars. This modified Starship was optimized for a human landing on the moon. The main difference between the standard Starship design and Starship HLS is the lack of heat shields and air brakes. This is due to the fact the moon doesn't have an atmosphere to heat the Starship HLS when landing. Starship HLS is also equipped with a special landing thruster that will be used on descent and takeoff from the lunar surface. The plan is for the Starship HLS to take off from Earth uncrewed using the Super Heavy boosters. The Starship HLS will reach the lunar orbit in approximately 3 days. After that, the Starship will just loiter in orbit awaiting its astronaut crew. The 4 astronauts will perform their journey from Earth to lunar orbit on NASA's Orion spacecraft. The plan is to use the Starship HLS as a taxi between the lunar orbit and the lunar surface. It is designed to take multiple trips transporting astronauts from the orbital station called the Lunar Gateway. Starship HLS is designed to dock in lunar orbit with either the NASA Orion spacecraft or NASA Lunar Gateway space station to take on passengers before descending to the lunar surface. For its first mission, 2 astronauts will stay on the Lunar Gateway, while 2 astronauts will go down the lunar gravity well towards the surface on the Starship HLS. The first lunar surface mission is planned to last a week, performing experiments and exploring the lunar surface. They will be using Starship HLS as a living space during this mission. After 2 weeks, surface astronauts will rejoin the rest of the crew that stayed on the Lunar Gateway in orbit. The Artemis Base camp is planned to be developed near the south pole of the moon in a region called the Shackleton Crater. Shackleton Crater was a very unique location as the peaks along the crater's rim are exposed to almost continual sunlight, while the interior is perpetually in shadow. NASA has also detected pockets of frozen water in that region. Shackleton Crater fits NASA's criteria for the ideal base camp position. Among the many things NASA takes into account in choosing a specific location, the most important are these 2 key features. The site must bask in near continuous sunlight to power the base and moderate extreme temperature swings. And it must offer easy access to areas of complete darkness that hold water ice. Having access to ice will help the Artemis Base Camp to achieve its goal of self-sustainability. Artemis Base Camp itself would be a lunar surface habitat that is planned to host 4 astronauts. Life support is at the top of the priority list for the base camp. The facility will require infrastructure for power, waste disposal, and communications, as well as radiation shielding and a landing pad. According to NASA, ideally the landing pad should be separated from other base camp features, such as the habitat or solar panels, by at least half a mile or 1 kilometer. It will be situated at a different elevation to prevent descending spacecraft from spraying high-speed debris at equipment or areas of scientific interest. This is important because according to their estimates, thrust from landing spacecraft could potentially spray hundreds of kilograms of surface particles, water, and other gases across several kilometers. You want to take advantage of the landforms, such as hills, that can act as barriers to minimize the impact of contamination, says Ruthin Lewis, a leader on NASA's South Pole Site Analysis and Planning team. So, we're looking at distances, elevations, and slopes in our planning. The Artemis Base Camp will be on the Earth-facing side of the Moon and make it easier for engineers to use radio waves to communicate with astronauts working on the Moon. Artemis Base Camp is planned to be supported by 2 mobility systems, a lunar terrain vehicle that will help astronauts traverse across the lunar surface, and a habitable mobility platform that could support trips away from the base for up to 45 days. Mobility is a major focus for NASA to fully utilize its moon base. Mobility is a major part of the Artemis Base Camp. Robust mobility systems will be needed to explore and develop the Moon. The same is true for Mars, making the habitable mobility platform a particularly important element, as we will need a similar type of vehicle to explore the Red Planet. This excerpt is from the 13-page report NASA released to the public outlining their plans for the moon base. In time, Artemis Base Camp will also include a hopper that could deliver science and technology payloads all over the Moon. It will be operated by the crew at Artemis Base Camp and refueled using locally sourced propellant. NASA also plans to establish a lunar far-side radio telescope that could be remotely emplaced and operated from Artemis Base Camp, a sort of backyard radio telescope for the Artemis Base Camp. The Artemis Base Camp is part of NASA's larger vision to develop infrastructure for deep space missions. This moon base will serve as proof of concept to develop sustainable outposts on the frontiers of space. Artemis Base Camp will directly fuel technologies and innovations that may help us colonize Mars in the future.